I listened to the Rest is History podcast with a professor who specialised in Italian food. Mm-hmm. He was saying our perception of Italian food over the years has changed, because apparently back in the day it was more like curry. It was very spicy. We had more sort of curry dishes. This is what the guy says on the podcast.
Interesting.
And then he says then you had like...
Oh, did it blandify it for overseas markets or something?
Well, they said the rise of America... And actually the way we've sort of learnt Italian food is the sort of the back and forth between Italy and America. So like Mama's meatballs and Nonna's lasagnas is totally American. And it's not actually Italian dishes. It's kind of dishes that went to New York.
There's also an author in Italian food who says that most of the Italian staples, which we assume are age-old, we assume that something like lasagna has been passed down through hundreds of years of kind of peasant, law. And word of mouth from mother to daughter, etc., stretching. And there's an Italian who did the research into this and found they're basically from the 1950s. Right? It's kind of like they conceived. In other words, there's a kind of post-war thing where they basically had to reinvent cuisine from scratch. By contrast, I had to review for The Spectator, being an advertising guy, when it was their 10,000th anniversary edition. The Spectator is the oldest continuously published magazine in the English language. And I'll just have to remember the date. It's 1820-something it started. And they asked me to review advertising, through the ages, through the pages of The Spectator. And one absolutely fascinating thing was... way back, because the first Indian restaurant was usually argued it's Viraswamy, but it wasn't. There was some weird earlier Indian restaurant in the UK, which doesn't exist anymore, but Viraswamy is, I think, 1903. And it might be 1923. But I assumed that Indian restaurant was a recent arrival to the UK. Now, in restaurant terms, it absolutely was.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you look at the pages of The Spectator in the 19th century, it's absolutely packed with advertisements for Indian spices, condiments, etc. And I thought, this is really odd. I wasn't expecting this. And then I realised, of course, it was people returning from the Raj. Okay. And you'd spent 20...
From...
Well, basically English colonial officers who'd been effectively out in the empire as a kind of senior civil servant in, Hyderabad, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And they'd done 20 or 30 years, and they'd retired back to England. And suddenly, after having 30 years of Indian food, they faced the rest of their life being spent eating kind of boiled mutton and overcooked vegetables. And they were clearly going insane. And so The Spectator, the purveyors of spices and general condiments and Indian stuff in the UK, the restaurant scene was comparatively late. The actual home cooking scene, clearly, particularly among a kind of formerly expat niche, seems to have been absolutely massive. I'd love someone to do more research on that, actually.
Yeah. Yes, it's almost like before the restaurants were created, or began to get going, there was almost this... I suppose that may have helped with the sort of the proliferation of it going so quickly. It was already sort of, the seeds were planted in these little households where they're used to the flavours.
Espressos is sponsored by supply chain software gurus Unleashed. It talks your e-com and accounting software. It's helped islands cut admin time in half, get granular clarity on your margins, know where your stock is, don't miss availability. Brands like Candy Kittens, Tiny Rebel and Trip all use Unleashed, and so should you.